were with the president all weekend. What was different? And I then want to get to Michael Steele about the Republicans allowing this kind of behavior. But first, the president this weekend, your thoughts?
Well, we saw the president in public just once on his way to and from that UFC fight at Madison Square Garden. I was part of the press pool for that. I didn't see Barnacle in his usual front row seat for mixed martial arts.
Mike couldn't make it.
Yeah, but it was certainly an eventful night. He was greeted with a mix of cheers and boos, unlike the World Series, of course, where he was roundly booed. And I will say, one of the fighters got kicked unconscious right in front of us. But setting that aside, behind the scenes, and then we saw him briefly make some comments there on the White House lawn, he's fixated on the impeachment inquiry, and we seem to be going in a couple of different directions. He and Republican allies are really trying to smear the character of some of the key witnesses here. Vindman, as you said, who is a Purple Heart recipient, suggesting that, he has a political agenda here. And others have said that perhaps not loyal to his country because of he's an immigrant and has Ukrainian roots. That in itself is a sort of a sinister allegation. He's suggesting that the whistleblower, whose name is protected by federal regulations, he has legal protections. The name has leaked in some far-right conservative websites. It seems at this moment the president is dancing with the idea of unveiling him himself, which of course would send us into another sort of real political crisis and constitutional firestorm if he were to do so, suggesting that he, of course, the whistleblower, can't be believed because he's a, quote, never-Trumper or someone who has a political agenda. And then you're seeing as you hinted at the opening, the idea of Republicans trying to change their strategy a little bit with the concept of a quid pro quo, either saying, well, all presidents do this is not unusual, or saying, well, yes, he did it, but it's not, and maybe it wasn't great, but it's not an impeachable offense. But the president himself, who refuses to suggest that he did anything wrong, last night on Twitter pushed back against that and said, there was no quid pro quo, I didn't do anything wrong. So again, Republicans really seem to have a muddle in terms of a strategy to defend themselves and their president during this inquiry.
Michael Steele, it's hard to not find yourself recycling the same story as we tell the story of the Republicans. But if you could speak face to face to these Republicans who are acting as Trump's frontmen, McCarthy, Scalise, and others, especially in terms of the rot that chips away at our democracy, these tweets, intimidating a witness, bullying people, trying to not follow the law, refusing to comply with subpoenas. If you could talk to them face to face and confront them about the way this president is buying them off with attention, access, campaign money, what would you ask them to do? What could you say that could change this very unhealthy dynamic?
Well, I don't know if there's anything that I could say or any of us could say at this point that hasn't already been said, but I would ask this. Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Is the value of democracy, the rule of law, the very ideals and principles that you've espoused for your entire political career, that you ran on as a freshman congressman or a two-term senator, as a leader both in the party and the country? Is it worth it? Is this one man worth all that you are sacrificing right now? And then if the second part of that would be, where are you going to draw the line? If you didn't draw it at Charlottesville, if you didn't draw it at Baltimore, if you didn't draw it at locking kids up in cages, if you didn't draw it at a Muslim ban, where are you going to draw the line? Because that, as an American, not as a Republican, not as a partisan, as an American, I want to know from my leaders where you draw the line. I know where I've drawn it, and I know where countless of Americans have drawn it, but where have you drawn it? And if you haven't drawn it yet, please let us know when you do. I bet you it'll be too late, though.
Yeah, I don't think there is one.
And that's the problem, Mika, is that these guys are so afraid of this one man that they're willing to sacrifice everything that they've stood on. And the other thing, all this talk over the weekend about a civil war around Donald Trump, and I'm going to ask you, are you really prepared to sit down with your constituents and support a quote, civil war because Donald Trump is in political trouble because of his own problems, what he's done? You're going to stand up for that. So draw me the line and let me know where it is. Make it bright and red so the rest of us will know as well. And then we'll understand exactly who you are and what kind of party you represent.
Well, 3 new.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.